tell you, Disney never gives out 4 episodes, particularly for a Marvel or Star Wars series. I'm talking about in advance to press. They usually give us 1 or 2, basically what you're going to see the first night or maybe the first 2 nights that the show airs. Certainly, this series has just 6 episodes. So you're like, so when I opened up my press site and I saw that I had 4 episodes sitting there, well, first I was like, oh boy. But then I was like, why did they give out so many? I was wondering if maybe Marvel had extreme confidence in this show, which I think they should, although it's not materializing with audiences. But I think the show is quite good, as you know. And then also I thought maybe Marvel was shaken by the reaction to Secret Invasion. And they were like, oh, let's try and engage with the press and show them how good this show really is so they can tell everybody. And I'm trying. But some of you are watching the show and just don't care for it. And I'd be curious as to why. And if that's still the case after having seen this incredibly shocking episode 4. In comparison, by the way, most streaming services give the press the entire season in advance. They might hold off on the last 1 or 2 episodes if they have some really big surprises in them, but for the most part, we get the whole thing. And I feel that Disney Plus doesn't do that, or at least HBO gives them a couple days in advance, so you have a little bit of lead time. But I think that Disney Plus has not been able to do that with their Marvel and Star Wars shows because understandably, they're worried about leaks. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. There were a lot of leaks for House of the Dragon, but they didn't really get spread around as much as leaks do for Marvel and Star Wars these days. And I feel people they want Marvel and Star Wars content to be ruined. Whereas if you dared to ruin House of the Dragon, people would be like, what's wrong with you? And I'm wondering why that's developed, because it really sucks for Disney and DC. People want all that stuff. They want to know now what happens. It's tough. I think it's tough for experiencing the content, and I think it puts the distributors in a difficult position. All right, so, but on that note, I don't really think, at least to my knowledge, a lot leaked about episode 4 or 1 through 4 for Loki. I think for the most part, people were surprised every week, right? I mean, there might have been one member of the press who was a jerk about it and spoiled things. But, I would think that I would have seen some, because, sometimes you guys will ask me if it's true. And I didn't see any big questions about Loki episodes 1 through 4. So I'm really glad. I'm glad. And once I watched through episode 4, when I got them as a member of the press, I could see why they went that far, because we got to see what an incredible cliffhanger episode 4 ends on. And then we still have 2 more to go. So the show's not over, but you're like, whoa. And by the way, I tweeted earlier this week about how episode 4 is very shocking, and one of you reminded me that in season 1, episode 4 had been a real shocker. But I think this one's even more shocking. I think it tops that. This one's incredible. This one to me plays like a season finale. But as I said, we have 2 more episodes to go, which I have not seen. Again, I only got 1 through 4. And by the way, since we haven't seen the jet ski dealership yet, which is from the trailer, I'm starting to wonder if all the timelines maybe haven't been destroyed, but perhaps reset. Wouldn't that be interesting? And put everybody back on the timeline, their respective timeline. That's my guess. Again, I haven't seen the last 2 episodes. But what would that mean for Sylvie? Would she go back to her original timeline as well? And would Loki need to recruit these agents? Would he go back? Or would he somehow be separate? Because we see him going to the jet ski location. So maybe he need to recruit the TVA agents again, right? He was pulled out of time. Maybe, at the beginning of the episode, he was glitching, remember? He was time slipping. And so they pulled him out of time. He pruned himself, which again, we got the resolution to in this episode, how that all happened. We saw the other side of it, which we'll talk about. But so I wonder if maybe that'll make him, be outside of the reset and he has to go recruit all the TVA agents again. But this time he gives them the choice of coming. But maybe He Who Remains gave him a choice. You don't know, because he wiped all their minds again and again and again, giving Marvel's TVA their very own Order 66, Protocol 42. I know that we have mixed feelings on Jonathan Major's delivery, but I like the way he said Protocol 42. Like he said protocol, and then like asking for a fine wine, he thought about what protocol he wanted to use that day, and he settled on 42. And I don't know, I liked it. I think Jonathan Majors' performance is all over the place, but I think at points it's quite good. So yeah, an episode full of shockers. Which one did you find the most shocking? For me, hands down, it was the spaghettification of Victor Timely, which they'd even set up with, OB talking about turning into spaghetti. When I watched this episode for the first time, I literally gasped out loud when that happened. That very rarely happens. I think I actually did that a little bit during Godzilla, with the new Godzilla show for Apple TV. I think I said oh shit once. And also, Godzilla looks so cute. Like I was talking out loud to the TV. But, so I watch a lot of TV, as you know, a lot of movies, a lot of screenings, and, I'm doing it in an analytical way. But occasionally they get me. And Victor Timely being spaghettified, he's dead. That was amazing to see. I was shocked. His hero moment was set up so strongly, and he'd been saved so many times at that point. Great writing. And he'd had that charming moment with the hot chocolate. You're like, aw. And he had become a part of the team. There are more Kangs, right? But are there more Victor Timeleys? I hope not. I hope he doesn't get reset, actually. Because while there are now an infinite number of Kangs, although who knows what's going to happen now, the timelines have exploded. But I think the death of a Kang should still mean something. I think Victor Timely's sacrifice, it was very, he insisted on going. I think that I wouldn't want to undercut that. What do you think? Do you think Victor Timely should be able to come back, or do you think that was an incredible end that should stick? Now, by the way, speaking of resetting, if the timeline explodes and then resets, right, the timelines, would He Who Remains reset, right? But then wasn't his backup plan with Victor Timely putting him, activating him in a way, or weaponizing him, as Sylvie said? Wasn't that to fix the loom so it wouldn't overload and explode, right? Maybe He Who Remains didn't even expect this. By the way, that tiny device was ridiculous. I didn't believe for 1 second that it could fix the loom. They're like, we're going to launch it at the loom, and it's going to make the rings bigger. And I'm like, how the heck is that little rotating ball going to do that? Right? And by the way, why does the loom need to have everything launched at it? It seems like a ridiculous system to me. But I guess it also is a little Jules Verne, right? A mix of science and fantasy, when Jules Verne's ideas were bigger than what science could allow at the time, which is what they say about Victor Timely in this episode, interestingly enough. Also, by showing us a similar mission in episode 1, where Mobius is wearing that same suit and succeeds in saving Loki, that gives us a success factor. So we thought we'd have it again. We thought it would happen again, right? When OB's like, you got to book it to the end of that platform. And Victor Timely, he was moving real fast, but, not fast enough at that point. So I thought for Victor Timely to fail so definitively was just shocking, quite shocking. And kudos to the VFX team who really sold the horror of that moment. I've rewatched it as I get ready to cover this episode, and you can see the insides and everything being spaghettified. It's incredible. And of course, Jonathan Majors' haunting scream also was the cherry on top of that horrific sundae. Oh, it was amazing. I loved it. Other shocking moments besides the death of Victor Timely and time, right? Obviously, Miss Minutes killing Docs and Docs' Minutemen with a smile on her face. What an evil bitch. Wow. You know what Chekhov says, though? If you show a gun on stage, and therefore by extension a weapon in any story, it must go off by the end of that story. That's what Chekhov said about seeing a gun on stage during a play. And sure enough, the torture device used to bluff X5, well, a lot of us, including X5, thought Loki might really use it, which is why the bluff worked. But it was actually used here to squish Docs and her Minutemen. Now, of course, Disney couldn't actually show that, but kudos to the directing, acting, and sound effects team for really selling it anyway. B-15 in particular, when she later discovered the scene, did a very good job selling the horror of that situation. You were like, oh, I believe they are super pulped. I did find, though, Docs' refusal to join Renslayer unbelievable. Docs was willing to blow up all the branch timelines and succeeded with a few of them. Now, I'm not saying that Docs couldn't have a change of heart or just decide she didn't want to work with Renslayer, right? All evil people don't want to team up together, as we've seen countless times in real life and fantasy. But a ruthless leader like Docs, and an experienced leader to boot, you would think she would play along with Renslayer and Miss Minutes until she could find an opening to get the better of them or escape, instead of basically just walking the plank, which is what she did. I mean, I guess when I think about it, maybe Docs never dreamed that Renslayer would actually kill her because they're fellow TVA agents, and that box went up so quickly, it was too late. by then. Later when X5 threatens Victor Timely with a very small box, I thought that was chilling. That X5 boy, he's also just pure villain. Now, of course, it was Miss Minutes' idea to use the torture device, but Renslayer didn't stop her, and she didn't flinch. She didn't look away when it was done. And you can see the general who helped He Who Remains win the war, which then led to the TVA. But you can also see why maybe He Who Remains didn't want to keep her around, because just as she demonstrated last episode, and again here, Renslayer is loyal to no one but herself. I mean, surely given the chance, she would have gotten rid of He Who Remains and ruled the TVA by herself. And that's exactly what she's trying to do here. She's even taking Miss Minutes as her second in command. I wonder if Renslayer is a variant on He Who Remains. Wouldn't that be interesting as well? I'm like, everybody's a variant. Oh, I have my theory. Some of you I know think Mobius is a Loki variant, and I think there might be something to that. But speaking first of things being rebooted, does rebooting Miss Minutes mean she can come back at some point, right? Or is she stuck as her now original time-telling program? Isn't that great? Again, that's really, they emphasized it once again here when she gave the time, that who runs the TVA? A time-telling program. It was a chilling sequence to see her de-evolve as she was shut down, right? To the different versions that Miss Minutes had been through time, right? And as she blinked out of cognizance, right, she lost her free will. Isn't that ironic? Because Sylvie, of course, has been going around saying, He Who Remains robs you of free will. And then here Miss Minutes loses hers. But Miss Minutes' last words to Victor Timely at first seemed like they might be a warning, or like some last minute help. Like deep down, she still loved him. And you know what? She still did love He Who Remains. And you can see that the way she chose to process Victor Timely's rejection is that Victor Timely would simply never be as good as He Who Remains. That's why she says you'll never be him, because He Who Remains would never have rejected her. Oh, but I think he would have. I'm like, Miss Minutes, if you get the opportunity, I think you're going to be real sorry with how it goes in round 2. So with all this going on, by the way, I did have to ask myself while I was doing my notes for this breakdown, what's happening with Loki? Because again, this is his show. Oh, and of course, speaking of Loki, as I said, we discovered that he pruned himself back in episode 1, as I think most of us expected. But still, to see the current Loki look down at his hand and realize that just moments ago he'd picked up the very time stick that he would need to save himself by pruning himself, that was a cool moment. I loved that. And also, I'm sure they got a great body double for Tom Hiddleston, but it was very convincing. I thought that was really great. I thought it was excellent. And who was on the phone? It was OB trying to find out what was taking them so long. That was a little bit of a letdown to me. I was like, how do you know to call there? But there's so much action in this episode. What's the character development that we're witnessing? Well, here's what I came up with, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it and your own theories if you have a different one. So I think that both Loki and Thor are trying to recreate Asgard after its destruction, but to recreate it as they saw it or how they wanted it to be. Thor, with New Asgard on Midgard, aka Earth, has created a charming village and tourist destination where everything is easy breezy, right? We're all getting along, everything's great. It's the surfer mentality to a degree that they've given Thor in the MCU. Which now some of us have mixed feelings about. But anyway, Loki is taking control of the TVA, we can see, and he's making them gods who look down on all life and guide it as they see fit, almost kind of like from Mount Olympus, right? To borrow from another mythology. But I think that's interesting. Sylvie even says, what right do they have to play God? And Loki's line is also chilling itself in a way when he says, we are gods. Sure, he's right, but when has that attitude ever worked out well? I did enjoy Loki talking about his past again, right? And how he thought Thor had gone soft when he'd first been banished to Midgard, aka Earth, and then come back and had compassion. But now Loki sees that same change in Sylvie, right? Maybe Thor went to McDonald's too. McDonald's, their new slogan can be, makes you compassionate. But anyway, she couldn't kill Victor Timely. And Loki now respected it as a different type of strength. That was also a great line from Sylvie, by the way. She couldn't kill Victor Timely because he looked so afraid, and He Who Remains didn't. And then she added, or maybe she just didn't notice how afraid He Who Remains was. Oh, that was incredible. Not just for the character, but about a comment on that kind of action in general, right? And not only and being aware of others, which is what compassion is. Oh, I just thought that was great. The producers of Loki have said the plan is to ultimately reunite Loki and Thor, and I do wonder what they will think of each other after having both been through so much at this point. Also, I wonder how Loki will feel about Thor taking in someone else's child, obviously under much better circumstances, but isn't that what Odin did with Loki? Right? I'm sure Loki will have complex feelings about it. Or maybe he'll think it's great. He's like, Thor, we'll do a better job with this one. And by the way, again, Loki is dating himself. When he was talking to Sylvie in Pie Land, and I noticed that all the pie slices, I don't know why I didn't notice it the last time we were here, but they're all perfectly positioned the exact same way. Like they're variants of pie slices, right? But it was like he was talking to himself in that room, which I thought was very interesting. Also, with Mobius on the scene, having all three of them back together again, Mobius and Sylvie are almost like an angel and a devil on Loki's shoulders with their two extreme viewpoints, or two extreme approaches. And as I said, some of you think Mobius could be a Loki variant, and that would fit. And that would also be funny that once again, Loki just only really gets along with himself. As for Mobius, Sylvie also calls him out for not looking for his original life on the timeline. But true to form, she cuts a little bit deeper. And she says that Mobius doesn't want to look on the timeline because it's not just about protecting his own feelings, but it's because he doesn't want to know how the sausage is made at the TVA. So he can keep, speaking of easy breezy, maybe, wouldn't it be weird if Mobius was a Thor variant? Oh, wow, I never thought of that. That would be incredible. All right, so anyway, that just blew my mind. We'll see. We have 2 episodes left. But anyway, Mobius, I think he doesn't want to know what they've been doing, really. He doesn't want to get the whole picture. Now, in contrast, Mobius doesn't want to care. But Loki perhaps he's come to care too much. That last shot of Loki with his pale green eyes right before time explodes, his eyes welled up with tears. That Tom Hiddleston sure can cry on cue. He just cares so much, not just about his friends and himself, but about all of it. I mean, that was just such an emotional moment. I thought it was beautiful. But also, I thought at that moment, maybe Loki can't believe that he was good this time, yet once again, things didn't work out for him. And just as X5, aka Brad, said earlier, that's always what happens with a Loki. A Loki always destroys everything. And here, he really, literally destroyed everything, it seems. No, but we have 2 episodes to go. So surely he didn't. But I'm real curious as to what's going to happen after this fade to white. Jonathan Majors, I thought, was pretty good this episode, as I said. The first time I watched this episode, I thought his idiosyncrasies were charming, and they made it seem very much like he was from a different era, where we picked him up. But the second time I watched it, combined with knowing how many of you didn't care for his performance at all last episode, I just settled on that his creative choices just aren't working. They just are too distracting. Also, I thought the OB joke about the crude model, which of course obviously was anything but crude, well, they just did that in Barbie. And then Casey had already asked OB to sign his TVA guidebook, so when Victor Timely and OB asked each other to sign theirs, I felt that undercut that moment. I wouldn't have had OB do that, in fact, unless OB's a variant, maybe. Now, although that was, so speaking of a snake eating its own tail, right? They said, who knows where one of our works begin and the other ends, right? Begins and ends. And OB says it's like a snake eating its own tail, which is what an Ouroboros is. That's what that symbol is. And it's supposed to represent renewal, actually, though. Life, death, and rebirth, which again makes me feel that time will reset rather than simply being destroyed. I thought Ke Huy Quan was only okay this episode as well. He and Victor, what a crazy pair, right? Because they're both making crazy character choices. But here I felt that OB, his character seems to have hit a wall in terms of development. Like, he was so exciting and so cool in the first few episodes, but they haven't really figured out anything else to do with him. Then finally, I guess we should talk about the big secret with Renslayer, right? That she led He Who Remains' forces during the big war. I think that was to kill all the other Kangs, right? And had been promised to rule at He Who Remains' side, but instead had her mind wiped along with everyone else's. And like He Who Remains does with everything, turned them into cogs into the cogs of a great machine. But don't worry, as I explained last week, Kang does that to himself as well, right? Kang is always seeing the big picture, and no one life is important. He's all about, I guess, like a chain reaction, you could say, which is interesting that Kang has moved beyond self-identity. That's weird. I mean, I guess that's why maybe he wasn't afraid. Sylvie shouldn't be so hard on herself. I was there. He didn't seem that afraid to me. All right, so But the point is that Renslayer had always wanted to be in the room where it happens, right? But it turns out she'd already been there and had been kicked out. And then she got pruned, right? When Sylvie enchanted X5, rebooting Miss Minutes also turned off the TVA magic dampeners. I thought that was great when OB was like, should I do that? And Loki and Sylvie were like, yes, that was great. But Sylvie was able to take control of X5, and she got Renslayer good this time. But she sent her to the same place, basically. She could have pruned her the other time, because when you get pruned, you get sent to the end of time. Although now she got sent to like the junkyard, and Sylvie was able to, last episode directly put Renslayer in the castle of He Who Remains. So now Renslayer is going to be in the junkyard, but that means she's still around and she can hike it to He Who Remains' castle again. But she's not totally gone. She's not dead, as we know, when you get pruned. But that means neither is D90. D90's still okay, and I'm sure he will be her new lackey when she pops up in the junkyard. And speaking of lackeys, what is going to happen with X5, aka Brad? He's clearly willing to do anything to keep his movie star life, but he's also clearly crossed into pure villain territory. I think there's just no redeeming him at this point. So I wonder what's going to happen with him, right? Will it be a careful what you wish for situation? I wonder. Will he get a third rematch with Loki? What happens when he gets reset? Will he have to start at the beginning of his acting career? We'll see. Just 2 episodes left. What do you think is going to happen? And what did you think of this shocking episode? Do you think it'll be enough to jolt some interest into this season? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.